no red line. I'm going to forward this to you. Other two counties.
All right, I'm going to get us started here in a minute.
Help this, Mom. Huh? You died. You have to have 2 medicine cards.
Too distracted for me. All right.
We empty that. Did we empty?
No, it's sitting over here on the carpet.
Testing. Can the people in the back hear the speaker? Do I need to turn the volume up? Is it good? Yes, turn it up. All right, hold on. All right. Let's see if this is any better. Hopefully, can hear and not drown out everybody in the front here, plus the your ears.
We can hear them.
Frank, maybe that can get turned up a little bit.
And we'll test again.
Give me a thumbs up if you can hear back there, please. Right.
Everybody in the back can hear? I'm seeing heads nod, so, okay. So,
Yeah.
I think we're good.
Okay.
Before we get the meeting started, I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. In-person meetings we did before COVID, not a problem, and then COVID, we got pretty good at remote meetings. And now tonight, we're trying some new technology because it's a hybrid meeting. We've got everyone here in the Opera House in person, but there are a number of people connected online through Zoom as well. So hopefully, the technology is working out. There's a second microphone up here plugged in so that everyone on Zoom can hopefully hear what's being said. And then at some point, we'll give the people on Zoom an opportunity to speak if they want to. I'll have to go up to the stage and switch out a cable. But within here, we'll then be able to hear what the people on Zoom are saying. I'm going to plug the Village YouTube channel real quick too, because since March of last year, all of our meetings have been streamed live on YouTube, and if you want to go back and watch the old ones, they're still there. One last thing, there are sign-in sheets around. Don't forget to sign in tonight if you're here in person. Get the meeting started, and prior to the public comment for the public hearings tonight on the two, I'll give a quick overview of our planning and zoning process and how it works, because as we discovered recently, those that don't do zoning all of the time sometimes get confused by the process, and sometimes the question is just how the process works versus what is actually being done. So we'll do that, and then we'll have the public hearing, and I'll have a little bit more about that once we get the meeting started. Just so everyone knows that camera is podium, so if you're here, wait to your opinion on YouTube. And if you don't want to be on TV the entire time, it would be a good opportunity to change seats. And so I've got to start this meeting, so I've got about 7 to 5, so we'll call this Planning and Zoning Commission meeting July 8th to order. I'll do a roll call. I am here. Mr. McCreary?
Here.
Present. Ms. Lee? Ms. Mager?
Yes.
All right, we have all the members form for a meeting. Village Administrator Terry Weiss is also here. She is helping to take notes. Our recording system at our meetings. Zoom is recording this as well, but she is helping to take notes for the minutes. Speaking of the minutes, our first agenda item would be the minutes from April 8th of 2021. We did not get a chance to approve
I
those.
can't do this. They're not, if the mics aren't even connected to the freaking mic.
I hear some sound coming from my phone. Everybody on Zoom, if you could please mute your microphone or your
Tom
telephone.
was out there and I said something to him and he goes,
Unmute to speak when it's that time. So do I have a motion to approve the minutes from April 8th?
I have a question, and I think it's more for Terry. On the top of the screen, it says he reiterated the percentages should have been in the code, and it's unclear to me as to who he is. Is that Jamie at regional planning? Yes. Okay. Okay. All right. Maybe it was my loss.
All right, so we got a correction.
Yeah, it was just clarification.
Oh, clarification, okay.
I've approved everything, so I'll make a motion to approve.
All right, Margaret makes a motion to approve. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Williamson seconds. Is there any discussion, further discussion on the minutes from April 8th, 2021? Hearing none, I will vote yay. McCreary?
Yay.
Looney?
I was not present at this meeting, so I believe I have to abstain.
Okay, abstention. Mocker?
Yes.
And Wait.
Yes.
All right, 4 votes, 1 abstention, minutes will be approved. Our next agenda item is visitors. This is a public hearing, so we have a lot of visitors here, but I will ask if there's anybody in person that is here for something other than the short-term rental public hearing or the lot coverage public hearing. Seeing none, we will move on to our old business, which is in fact our public hearings. So I said I'd give a quick planning and zoning overview. This is a public hearing on some proposed changes. So everyone knows the process. The Planning and Zoning Commission, their charge is to continually review and update as necessary our zoning code. When zoning code changes come about, the commission discusses them, and if they want to propose a change, they then come up with what that change will be, and vote to send it to a public hearing, which is what we're here for tonight. The public hearing, public hearings are not generally debate sessions, question and answer sessions. They are the opportunity for the committee members to receive input from the public about the proposed changes. We have a few people here tonight. Our council rules give speakers 5 minutes. So we'll go with that 5 minutes for tonight. So everybody, you don't have to take the whole 5 minutes, but if you want the 5 minutes, you can have it. And like I said, while it's not generally a question and answer session, based on what you say, committee members may have a follow-up question. So We will do that. For these public hearings, we will go in the order they are on the notice. So we will do the short-term rentals first, and then the lot coverage percentage second. If you wish to speak for both of those, you will have an opportunity, but I'll just ask that you only speak for the one topic. That way we can keep our notes separate and keep these two issues separate. But like I said, if you want to speak for both, everyone will have that opportunity. I did mention there will be the 5 minutes. We're going to do everyone in person first, and then I will take a brief pause to switch over to the Zoom meeting to give people online an opportunity to speak. And then we will, at the end of that, we'll flip back to in person for the second part. So in a minute, I will take my seat and just ask whoever wants to come up first. And if others want to queue up in the line or in the seats over here, however you want, or just wait in your seats until that person is finished, that's fine. We just ask them to come up for the record and everything. We'll ask you to give your name and your address, and then we will listen to what you have to say. So with that, we will start the public hearing on the short-term rentals, so that everyone knows kind of how this came about. And I'll do this for both, a quick overview. Short-term rentals came about, it's an emerging industry. We were unsure what to do. We did have one operator ask us what they needed to do, what village requirements we had. And that kind of led us to, do we need to do something? To do this, we took a multiple meetings, systematic approach. The Planning and Zoning Commission, we had numerous meetings. We had one meeting where we specifically invited in owners of short-term rentals, Airbnbs, to explain to us how it works, how they operate, and answer our questions. We had another meeting where we invited in residents and neighbors of those Airbnbs we knew about. In that process, we discovered that there is a rental house in Baltimore that's not on Airbnb, but that is still available for daily or weekly rent, just by word of mouth. After we received that information, we looked at what other communities were doing. We looked at what regulations or restrictions they may have. And then we engaged in several meetings of discussion about, do we need to do anything or want to do anything, and if so, what? And then we started the discussion about what requirements we wanted to have, and came up with the proposed amendments. Those have been posted on the website for a while. I do believe we emailed them to the known Airbnb operators. So that's kind of the process we took. And so now we are ready to receive your input. So I will sit down, and whoever wants to come up first, again, just give us your name and address, and listen to what you have to say.
Yeah, my name is Rick Foreman. I live at 120 South Liberty Street. I'm also a council member and an Airbnb owner. I purchased a house on Market Street that had been used as a bed and breakfast for roughly 10 years. I bought it at sheriff's sale. I completely renovated it, spent a lot of money to bring it up to modern standards, and then listed it on Airbnb. And that's kind of what kicked this whole thing off in some regards. So since I'm a council member, I'm only one person, so I can only do what I can do. I'm just gonna pretty much let this process play out. And if this becomes law, then I will just shut down the Airbnb and turn it over to one lawyer, because the things that are in this are beyond what I'm willing to do. I already have far more insurance on it than what's required in this. So I see a requirement for a background check, which I have no problem with, but why are we singling out Airbnb owners versus other people? Airbnb has lots of safeguards in place already. This is a good thing for the community. This brings people to town in tourist capacity. They eat at the restaurants. And no one's been able to tell me what the problem is here that we're trying to solve. I mean, I just can't for the life of me understand what issue or problem this legislation solves. So that said, I'll just, when it gets to council, I guess I'll probably be required to abstain, although I've been told over and over it's not about me. But then again, I'm still only one vote, so it really won't matter. So I'll just watch the process play out and hope that we just end this here. So, thank you.
Thank you, Rick. And he brought up one thing I forgot to mention when I was talking about the overview. Once planning and zoning receives this information tonight, they have a couple of options. Approve and pass on what's been proposed, change it based on what they hear, or just completely deny it and scrap it. If they change it and approve it, or just approve it as proposed, it then goes to council. Council then has legislation to approve it. It has to go through, it'll go through the 3 readings, and council also is required by law to have a public hearing on the changes. So in order to change the zoning code, there are 2 public hearings. So I'm sorry I forgot to mention that. So thank you, Rick, for mentioning that if it gets approved here, it goes to council. So who would, anybody else on Airbnb? Come on up.
Thank you. I'm Brad Scholl, 1130 Railroad Street. We are also one of the other homes in Baltimore that participates with Airbnb. We've not been active, obviously, with the COVID season, but we're still reconsidering whether we're going to continue that. Not gonna, I have questions, but I'm going to present them, and if you guys are able to answer them later, that'd be wonderful. Speaking exclusively to the conditions, first of all, I probably should, I'll echo a lot of what Rick said, benefits we do have in the community with these and so on and so forth. But at the same time, we want to make sure that we're following whatever codes there are. And as I've said in the past, I think it's probably appropriate that we do some kind of registration with the village, at least know that there's a presence there for a variety of reasons. I'll do my best to speak up. A couple of the things that we looked at, and where I looked at in particular, was a copy of Secretary of State articles of incorporation. What if you don't have incorporation? So keep that, if you're not incorporated, keep that in mind. Understand what you're looking for with the liability insurance. It's clearly apparent to me that most of the documents that were looked at were the city of Columbus, the city of Dublin, a number of those areas, and even Upper doesn't have any because they outlaw them all together, but at the end of the day, I can see where these have come from. So it's probably a little bit out of market from what we're dealing with here in Baltimore, but nonetheless, I can see where that's come from. Also, with the background check, I think it's probably not really appropriate in our setting. I understand in Columbus and Dublin, we can, I don't mean this is derogatory, but let's face it, there could be some shady characters putting up their places for rental that probably need to be looked at. But this is not that kind of community, I believe. Looking at the fire and safety plan, I don't think the village has any statutory authority to carry out anything to that level. There's nothing in the Ohio Revised Code, Administrative Code that speaks to that because they are private. Speaking in my instance, it's a private residence. And only very few provisions come under that, meaning foster care inspection may be required. If it's a child care, it can require an inspection, but there's nothing, and the village doesn't do its own fire inspection. That's done by the fire district. And vicariously, I understand it's part of, Baltimore's part of that, but they're the ones that adopt the fire code, and they're the ones that would enforce it. So the village doesn't have this ability. That being said, we all want these places to be safe, and we want them to be carried out in a healthy manner, but at the end of the day, there's no provision for that. Also, the items under the building code, also would like to know what provision of the building code that you would be inspecting against. And as far as the fee is concerned, I don't know what that fee is. I've said in the past in other meetings that I'm not opposed to a modest fee for making sure that the village is aware that there's a business going on for the purpose of short-term rentals. The one thing that I noticed that was from the old bed and breakfast part of the code was a sufficient off-street parking. Now, in our particular situation, we have ourselves who park in the garage, and then we make our kids park mainly on our ramp going into the garage. So the only alternative we have is the parking spots immediately in front of our home that we don't use for personal use. In fact, our neighbors do use them because they can just as much room as well. But usually when there's guests, there's only one car most of the time. For those of us, and I won't speak for Rick, but for those of us who've been carrying out a business of this type in this community, it's been a full benefit to the community and no detriment in any way, shape, or form. We'd like to see that, obviously, when this gets to council, if it gets to council, that there be some provision to consider some grandfathering for those who have been doing what needs to be done to safely and healthily provide this kind of service to the town, and it benefits the business owners to have this kind of thing in town. So with that, that's all I have right now. Thank you.
Mayor, I don't remember the date, but we were discussing definitions on these several of these things. One of the things that Mr. Shaw brought up was about the registering that Park Corporation did. We discussed that, and I believe we had changed that to where it just was registered with the state. I don't think it was registered as a corporation with the state. I thought we changed that, but it's not reflected here.
So what I remember that discussion and what we have sent forth under conditions, which is subsection C part 2, the subpart B does, if approved as written, would require an owner of a short-term rental to provide a copy of the Ohio Secretary of State Articles of Incorporation.
I thought we had amended and changed that where just registered with the state, whether it be vendor's license or whatever applicable state license.
I remember that, and I think the discussion circled back to that the Secretary of State, there was no actual vendor's license or anything for this type of stuff, and since it's not a hotel, there was no state agency for an Airbnb to register with short of the Secretary of State.
But wouldn't the vendor's license still apply, just like if you're a dog groomer or a tree trimmer or whatever else?
I believe we looked at the vendor's licenses and those aren't under that either.
Okay. Well, I do agree. I don't think we need to require someone to be appropriate. So we need to look at that before this goes to council. Absolutely.
And so what will happen tonight for everyone in the committee is after receiving all of the information tonight, committee can discuss it tonight, or at our next meeting, we can convene, because we have the 2 public hearings tonight, and reconsider based on everybody's input, what changes may be necessary. Or like I said, if the committee wants to do that tonight, that is always an option as well. Is there anybody else in person to talk about, all right.
Hello, Heather Shaw, wife of Bradford. That is correct, there are no vendor's license needed for this, but somebody could apply for LLC, their business licenses, their marketer's license, just to clarify. And the only thing I want to add to that, what Brad had said was long-term rentals. I feel as though we are being completely kind of sectioned out and almost preyed upon, and there's less than 5 of us that have short-term rentals. But yet you have many long-term rentals in this community where a lot of the properties aren't even taken care of as well as our properties. We're actually judged and rated, and so we keep things pretty strict. So my question to you is, if we're going to be doing short-term, I surely hope that there is a plan for long-term as well. Because it's just not fair, it's just not right. I don't take this lightly. But if you're gonna do one section of the community do something, then you must make the others do the same. That's it.
Thank you. Anybody else in person for short-term rental public hearing? All right, if not, we're going to see if this little bit of magic works, and hopefully we'll turn it over to anybody online here in just a second. So let me flip that.
All right. Is there anybody on? There we go. All right, let me get up to the microphone. All right. Now whoever's up. Yep. All right. Is there anybody online that would like to speak about short-term rentals? All right, hearing, I'm going to switch, the online one off.
Background check. Not sure what other business in town requires a background check.
Every single teacher in the school.
And that's, as a school, that's a little different than a business. So no other business in town is requiring anything of this nature. And like I said, it was an Airbnb for 10 years before I bought it. And no one brought up any of this. Now all of a sudden, this is a problem. I don't understand why. I don't understand why everything changed, why all of a sudden we care. Many towns do nothing about this. I'm not sure. That's my point. What problem are we trying to solve here? The only problem that I can see is that we have a seriously overreaching government. I don't see a problem that we're trying to solve with this legislation. I just see a government that is overreaching outrageously. So that's my issue with it. It isn't that I can't comply with any of these things. I absolutely can. There's no problem there. It's that why now? What is causing us to have to require all of this now? When I bought this house at a sheriff's sale in terrible condition, spent a lot of money on it, put it back in service for effectively exactly. These things, I just don't feel I should have to. And what problem, what's causing, what are we trying to fix? What's the issue we're trying to solve? If someone could just tell me what that is, I don't understand what that is. It's just, as far as I can tell, government intrusion. So that's the best answer I have for your question.
So just to reiterate, only thing you really have problem with is background. Is that correct?
But he has a problem with the fact that we're doing this at all.
Well, what I was getting was.
Correct.
That was the only one.
Kay says yes. Kay's saying I have a problem with it all, and I will confirm that yes, I have a problem with it all.
Oh, okay, but I mean,
Because no other business is being put through these types of scrutiny.
well, you know,
Ken's Body Shop isn't put through this kind of scrutiny. Ace Hardware isn't put through this kind of scrutiny. No other business in town is being put through this kind of scrutiny. And I don't know why all of a sudden Airbnb is a problem. I'm trying to understand what problem this is trying to solve.
There's not a problem that we're trying to solve. We're trying to be proactive so that in the future, other people follow your standards and there are no problems as we move on.
Can you speak at the mic? We can't hear you.
Sorry, I didn't use my teacher voice well enough, okay? It's not that there is a problem, okay? We're not seeing this as you have caused a problem, Rick. And I guess I'm offended that you think that we're picking on you. We're not. We are trying to be proactive to make sure that others follow your good example. That's why we then we look at what would be some other concerns as we move forward and other people want to change in this area so that we have uniformity and maybe in this will give us guidelines to the back and then at long term. So I don't
Didn't mean to.
I reiterated exactly what you did previously, and someone questioned the zoning of it and whether it was appropriate or allowed. We didn't just voluntarily say, what do we need to do, what do we do, what should we do? I was told that I was not zoned for the activities I was conducting. So I applied for a zoning change, which was not, like, very much denied. And then it's more into this. So to paint it as though the Schultz and I are trying to set the groundwork and lay the groundwork Airbnb as well, and we just respect it. That's why they came to me. They come looking for help or advice or direction. They came because they knew whatever happened to me would also be imposed on them. So the narrative that we came in looking for what we need to do or what we should do is not at all the case. So I'm not saying anybody's picking on me. I'm just saying I don't see the problem that we're solving here. We're just making it future to do something that I think is a great thing for the community. A couple of houses that falling into disrepair like so many others.
Because we can afford to make them the nicest houses in town because of this activity. We're held accountable by the Airbnb community at a much higher level than what anyone in town can afford to hold us accountable to. So there are checks and balances in the Airbnb system. So if we did nothing, is there a problem? And if there is a problem, please tell me what it is, and maybe I would be thrilled to help you craft an appropriate solution. But I don't think all of this is necessary. That's why I'm against it. It's not that I'm against government or against everything. I'm just against this because I don't see where it solves any problems or has any purpose. So I'll leave it at that, go back to the seat.
Well, if I remember correctly, the reason this whole thing started was, it wasn't to change regulations, but we had to change definitions because it was laid out as a bed and breakfast. That does not always apply. That's to answer your question. That's how this all got started. I believe you were planning to. I'm sorry, I'll speak aloud. What I remember was at a meeting, I believe around the first year, we had to change definitions because it said in our zoning code, bed and breakfast. That term does not apply across all species of this. We have everything from owner occupied to, your place is not owner occupied.
Right.
At that time, you're using it as an event center. So we needed to draw a distinction between the two. So that's how the whole thing started. It wasn't that we were trying to add regulations. We were trying to change the definition to make it fit.
And to Ken's point, the phrase event center was kind of a catalyst for the whole problem. Okay, I will admit that. The person who owned it prior to me was using it very much the same way. When we say event, it's a rehearsal dinner. It's tonight, there's bridesmaids and brides there having their premarital get together. Is that an event? It's 8 or 10 people staying at my house having a good time. To them, it's an event. To me, it's 8 people staying in my house for 3 nights. Okay, so the word event center sort of got taken out of context. People pictured hundreds of people and parking problems and all this, which is what brought it to the forefront as a zoning problem, because it is zoned R3. However, it used to have the Market Street overlay, which I supported removing in the naive belief that we could just actually zone things the way they should be zoned. I don't believe that this house is truly an R3. It's across from the post office, the police station. It's 2 doors down from an ice cream shop. It's across the street from an office building. It's a block from the school. It's a block from a paper. So to me, it's not an R3, but I've already lost that fight. So I'm not going to have that. I'm not even going to go there. But I supported removing the Market Street overlay, which did allow a much broader scope of things. I regret doing that because I've come to learn that in a small town, maybe we can't zone the way things should be zoned. So that is what it is. I can't rewrite history. But that said, it is an R3 now. The word event got taken out of context, possibly, because I certainly don't want to have 100 people in my house. It depends on your definition of event. So it turned into this, and maybe it didn't need to, and maybe we could walk it back and undo it. I don't know. I hope so. Yes.
If I could ask,
Yes.
is there a certain limit on occupancy in your building? So do you have, I know I've stayed at Airbnbs. Okay. So in your notebook, is there anything that says there's a limit of X number of people?
There is not.
Okay.
Because I have had
local families have their out-of-town families stay there.
Yes.
And they have Thanksgiving there, or they have Christmas there, and I have not put a limit on that number of people.
Okay.
If I got any sense that it was gonna get too big, I would basically tell them, if you park illegally, I will call the police and tell them to ticket you, okay? Don't do stupid in my house. But no, I do not have a maximum person limit, but I haven't had any issues that I'm aware of, and none of the neighbors have told me that I've had an issue. So
Okay.
if there is, I'll deal with it.
Okay. I was just curious
Yeah.
because I didn't know if there was a policy or anything.
It
on
has sleeping arrangements for 10,
there. Okay.
okay?
Yes.
But can some people come for dinner
Right.
or I'm reluctant to use the word event, but your Thanksgiving or whatever you want to call it, your rehearsal dinner. I have allowed that. I continue to
Right.
allow it.
Could traffic be directed down the street on public streets if you have cars that there's overflow?
We have actually had overflow parking, and most times we were able to put them in our own yard.
Okay.
There's not a house to the east. A couple times people have parked down in the floodplain, which is not my property, but
Right.
most of the time they're able to fit up on my property.
Okay.
And a couple times they parked at the post office, and the post office said, you need to move that car, and they did,
Mhm.
so it wasn't a problem.
Right.
But most of the time when these things happen, the post office is closed, so really nobody cares.
Okay.
So the post office does get used, it is public property, so I don't know that there's a problem there. I could ask the postmaster, but he certainly can't give me permission to use it
Right.
because it's just not in his authority.
Right. But technically they could park over on the other side of the bridge on the streets, public parking, technically.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
All right.
And to my knowledge, there has been no problem with parking other than some cars were trying to be nice to the post office, so they parked back in the back. And the postal route carriers were coming back and they needed to put their vans in there. They're like, no, move them up there where the customers go. You can't put them back here. We need these spots.
Okay.
So that's been the only time that I'm aware of a parking issue, and it was resolved immediately.
All right. Thank you.
So, any more questions?
I think we're good, thank you.
Okay.
Did you have anything?
No.
You good?
Thanks.
Can I make a comment?
Yes.
Can I add? And get a little fired up here. I do want to make note that we have no problem with a registry, registering our business. We have no problem with that. We have no problem of creating consistency. That's the problem. There's no consistency. We've had long-term rentals for how many years? But you want to start with 2 people who have Airbnbs in your community to try to set a precedence? How does that make sense? To answer your question about background checks too, you're asking the owners of the homes to get background checks. Schools, I understand, you're dealing with children, you want to make sure you don't have child molesters coming in and teaching children, and that's why they require background checks. But you don't require people who start a business to complete a background check. There's not even anywhere that I can think of that where you start a business, you have to have a background check. So I just want to make sure that you understand we have no problems with consistency and protecting the village and protecting interests. We don't have that problem. What we do have the problem with is the inconsistency and being single. Okay?
So it's come up a couple of times about long-term rentals. And just for the record, in 2019, I had an ordinance, I drafted an ordinance for council that did something very similar for long-term rentals to address the blight problem that several of them provide and cause the village. And a council member that spoke here earlier tonight led the forefront to shut that down. So long-term rentals was attempted to be done before this, but it was defeated. So long-term rentals continue to be a problem, and it is something that I think council and the zoning commission will continue to look at. But this did not start with short-term rentals. So they are on the With long-term rentals, if the zoning commission wants to take it up, previously it was zoning decided that, I think we discussed it there, it was better for council. And so we presented it first to council and it was defeated. So that is your long-term rental issue. All right. Anything else on short-term rentals?
My name is Alicia Hoskins. My address is 429 South Main. And I have no skin in the game when it comes to short-term rentals or Airbnbs. However, what you just said to us was that the reason that was short-term rentals was the beginning of this. Now you're trying to say, well, it's to help us get to long-term rentals.
No,
No, okay, but then it goes back to, oh, no. It wasn't long, we can do long-term rentals, now we're doing short-term. That makes no sense. Please clarify.
I was wrong. I'm not a person, so I didn't know.
Okay, so
my implication that this might lead us into long-term, looking at long-term was only my thought process. I wasn't aware that they had already.
Okay, so because you can't do long-term though, you're gonna go short-term. Why you have to have something for short-term? If you really can't do anything for long-term, that's really where our problem's at.
I called you out. You can speak again.
I don't think she's fine, but.
The mayor kind of singled me out and said that the council member that's here was leading the charge to shut that down. Okay, a big part of trying to do anything like short-term rentals, you can do an annual inspection because it isn't someone's home. Part of trying to regulate long-term rentals, the biggest part of it was an annual inspection. And I don't know about you guys, but it's a part of the Constitution where I'm from the government, I need to come in and take a look around. Now, the people who aren't doing anything wrong are gonna be fine with that. But the people who are cooking meth, this is my home, you can't come in. You just can't come in. Unless you have a search warrant, you can't come in. I live here, I rent this house, this is my home. So to try to do long-term rental opens up a whole nother can of worms with search and seizure and search warrants and all those sorts of things. And you really can't improve the situation if you can't go in and hold the landlord accountable for the condition of the property. And you can't because the people who live there, it's their home. You're going to need a search warrant. The landlord even has to give them advance notice, but the government's going to need more than that. So that was why I had a problem with it. And we do have some bad actors as landlords. I will acknowledge that, but we are sort of sifting through some of those and it is getting better, but it's still a problem. I acknowledge that. But that was why I felt like it was going to burden the good landlords far more than it was going to burden the bad landlords. And it wasn't going to solve the problem. So that was why I led the charge to not do that. So anybody was curious about that? Thank you.
All right.
All right, is there anything else on long-term? I will say that Rick's recounting for his reasons for wanting to defeat that were absolutely his thing with that. My counter to that would be I would rest on my profession as an attorney and having written similar ordinances in other municipalities that have upheld challenge to be okay. But that's a debate for another day, another time. So anything else on short-term rentals? Any more questions from the committee? All right, are we ready to move on to the lot coverage portion then? All right, hold on a sec. Let me grab my thing here. So lot coverage just came before the committee relatively recently, earlier this year, when the zoning administrator was having people apply for certain structures that would drastically increase the impervious surfaces on the property. So the committee looked at that and decided that for some reason we did not include them. Lot coverage percentages are fairly common in other municipalities. And things, and when we discussed it, things, your homes get, crazily enough, gravel driveways count as impervious surfaces when we're counting this. So, someone going to pave their driveway after the fact isn't going to increase their impervious surface. But after some debate, it was decided in the committee to propose adding lot coverage percentages to be consistent and to help limit the amount of impervious surfaces, because those of course cause runoff and rainwater concerns. What the committee brought forth is in an R1, which is a minimum square footage of 20,000 square feet on a lot for 30%, which equals about 6,000 square feet of coverage. In an R2, which is a minimum square footage of 15,000 square feet to allow 35%, which equates out to about 5,250 square feet. And on an R3, which has a minimum square footage of 6,500 square feet to permit 40%, which equates out to about 2,600 square feet. So that's how that came about. Again, this one just came up at the beginning of this year. So with that, I will turn it over to the first person that wants to rise and speak about lot coverage.
Okay, once again, my name is Rick Foreman. I live at 120 South Liberty Street. I'm also a council member. My wife and I used to live on Holder Road. We had a couple of acres. That property is now in the village. Out on Holder Road, there's a very serious stormwater problem. Most of the houses are on private septic. There is no stormwater structure because the village did not require the developer to install it. So they have a very serious stormwater problem out there. Out there, with this legislation, those people will be able to have roughly 27,000 square feet of impervious surface. My wife and I didn't need a 5-bedroom house anymore. We didn't need 2 outbuildings. We didn't need 2 acres. We sold that, bought an in-town lot that is roughly 84 by 132. On our 84 by 132 foot lot, we have a stormwater structure that all of our stormwater runoff is dispersed into directly. We have municipal sewer and we have city water. All of that is handled. On our city lot, we're only allowed 4,000 roughly square feet, I'm rounding, of impervious surface. We're nearly at that max. I have no outbuildings, I have no patio, I have no pool. Robin and I can afford to live anywhere we want. Most people know that. But most people who live on these lots cannot. So I would even go so far as to say that this legislation would be discriminatory in that regard. But that said, I think we really need to reconsider this in some manner because I totally disagree. Because it has nothing to do with stormwater runoff when there's problems in this town. There are big problems in this town. Dirty water, I&I, water getting into the sanitary and causing it to overflow raw sewage into Walnut Creek. There are big problems. This doesn't solve it. I would love to work on solving that, but this doesn't do it. So that's all I have to say. If anybody has any questions, I'll stay here for a minute.
Any questions? All right.
Thank you.
Dana Pickett, 701 West Washington Street. I have some concerns for this because the house that I currently live in had a side lot that was sold off when the owner before me sold my house. She sold the property beside it and they built a house next to it. So now the distance between my house and the next house is much smaller. I have a driveway that goes from the property street side all the way back. we are interested in putting in an additional garage pad. As a matter of fact, we actually had someone out and give us an estimate to do that, to add an extra 15 square feet around so that we can actually pull out back in and have a third car park so that we are not on the street. Because right there across the street from the parking lot area of the high school, if you look down that lane, the entire part of the street has cars parked on it now. My concern with this is okay, I don't have the lot size to worry about. You're also saying that this is a storm runoff. Well, the storm runoff issue is the road is so badly paved that none of the water is going into the storm drains that are in front of my house. I have a puddle every time it rains at the bottom of my driveway. So you can watch the water run from the high school, and this is the storm drain, and comes right across the street to my side and goes down the left side of Washington Street down to my sister's house. So 4 houses in my area are constantly flooded. That has nothing to do with the size of our lot. That has something to do with the way the road is paved and the grading there is really bad. And has it always been like that for the last 10 years? Absolutely. So I have a problem with the zoning issue because it's going to affect me in a way that I have no control over. I don't think it's fair to tell people in lot sizes like this that you're going to make a decision that what I can or cannot put on my property. If it is my lot to begin with, if there are other issues causing those drain offs, and that's what you're concerned about, that the village should be taking care of, not me as the home.
Thank you.
Thank you. Did anybody in council committee have any questions for?
I'm sorry, what was your name again? Oh, Living Better, that's okay, thank you.
Sorry, I'm making my notes on what she said for later. Is if anybody else wants to speak, you can head on up.
My name's Amy Newsom. We live at 924 West Market Street. We have rented that home for 5 years, and it's been something we've really worked towards to be able to become a homeowner. We just went in contract yesterday with the house here in Baltimore, hoping to close in August. And it was our desire, when we were looking with our realtor, that we wanted to stay in Baltimore. And when you think about all of these zoning issues, and I look at this, I had no plans to come here tonight. I didn't. And I saw that and I started thinking about it. And I'm like, well, what if I want to put a pool into my house? I don't know what plans I have, but I know I have a small front yard. We plan to keep that house as nice as we do the rental, like even though we don't own, we take exceptional care of because it's our home. But I may want to put a pool in for my kids or my granddaughter. I may want to put maybe a little bit of a larger shed in, and I'm not going to be able to do that as the property sits because it's a long, narrow property. And these restrictions are going to stop some of these dreams or hopes that I'm envisioning for my new home in this community. And maybe that's something you need to think about when you are thinking about these new homeowners that are coming in here. They want to move here to Baltimore. It's been a fight and a struggle trying to find a house here in Baltimore so that we could be homeowners and not just renters. And this is gonna, some of these dreams are gonna have to be taken away. We're not asking to completely junk our yard, but we want to have access to what is right for our yard so that we can enjoy the property that we own.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good evening. My name is Robert Landis. I'm at 3939 State Route 26. In conjunction to what the lady just spoke about, in my opinion, I would like to see the ordinance adjusted to break into 2 categories: structures and what I would call hardscapes, which would be driveways, sidewalks, patios. I spent a lot of time last night going through the county auditor site, looking up people's lot sizes. doing the math. And there's quite a few homes in Baltimore that are very, very tiny. Back in the day, outbuildings and pools and all that good stuff wasn't necessarily something that the normal person could afford or would afford to do. At this point, I don't remember, Brad, what did you say R3 was as far as lot size?
R3 is a hold on, it's right here. Hold on. R3 has a minimum square footage of 6,500 square feet.
So minimum 6,000.
Yeah.
Do you by chance know the percentage of the village that is an R3?
Not off the top of my head.
It's a very, very high percentage. Creekway Drive is over by the school, back behind the Marathon. Lots of small lots over there, over by the old middle school. Lots of small lots over there. I could see a lot of those people having a hard problem putting a simple 10 by 10 patio in their backyard. Matter of fact, I looked up all your lots. 3 of you would be very, very close to exceeding the limit. I looked up a couple council members. A couple of them are very, very close to exceeding the limit. And I think that's where some smart decisions about breaking it into 2. I don't know that anybody needs to cover more than 30% of their lot with a structure, but to have to sit in your backyard around a fire or around a picnic table and grass because you can't put a patio in, doesn't seem like a good decision. I think we should let people improve what I would consider improving their lots by allowing for patios, sidewalks, driveways. Either that or potentially another solution would be to take all the old lots and rezone them into a different code. So that way, any new lots would be adherent to this ordinance, but anybody that currently lives in Baltimore in a current lot wouldn't be subject to that.
Wait, I just want to clarify on what you just said, the last proposal. So what you suggested was take the existing R3 lots or something and make them a different code than any future lot that would be an R3.
But I did go look up Pickerington's. They have 7 R codes breaking out their lots. And I don't think we need 7 for Baltimore's sake, but potentially like I said, there's a lot of small lots currently in the village. I don't think, for the most part, any new lots would ever be constructed of the current size that I'm speaking about, unless they're in a zoning that would allow for that, which would not be applicable to this ordinance in the first place. For instance, I think mixed business use or something like that. These are only applicable to the R codes. So, like I said, I'm not against the ordinance. I think maybe just breaking it into 2 categories, structures and hardscapes. And I think that probably, I don't know where you can put pools in that. But, if it were me, I would say hardscapes go up to like 70%. So your house could be 30%. Then above that, hardscapes could go to 70.
So just for clarification though, on that, someone would have 100% of their lot covered by an impervious surface.
So it wouldn't be in conjunction to, right? So if your house takes 30, your hardscape would only be 40.
Okay.
Correct.
Thank you for the clarification.
So you'd still have to have 30% grass or mulch, flower.
So basically 70% coverage. Okay.
Right.
Thank you for clarifying.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Don Moore. I live at 214 East Monroe Street. I have a small house, a small lot. I would eventually like to pave my driveway. Now you're telling me I can't? I would like to fix my sidewalks. You're telling me I can't. That's not right. It's supposed to be home improvement to make the town beautiful. You're destroying it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. I do want to say, if you have an existing sidewalk and we're putting one on there, that's counting towards, and a driveway paving, like I said, a gravel driveway already counts against that. So if you were paving it, unless you were increasing the size of your driveway, it's already calculated in there. Okay. Okay, so it would increase it. Okay, so I'm gonna make my note on that here as soon as I get back there. So, okay, thank you.
Sure. In order to enforce that, then we really have gravel.
The question was putting down a sidewalk or driveway, even gravel, would that require a permit now? And the village administrator is shaking her head, yes, that it still currently requires a permit. It's a right-of-way commitment, so, all right. Is there anybody else to speak on lot coverage? Okay.
Okay, so anything gravel on your lot, on your lot, will be a shed under 100 square feet. In order to enforce this, you would require a permit in order to make sure you're not exceeding this percentage. You have a right on that.
The question for everyone else and for the record is, so a gravel or a shed in the yard would require a permit for enforcement mechanisms. And that's the question.
Yes.
And I think that is something we have to look at because our current code does not require a permit for outbuildings less than 100 square feet.
Or concrete or gravel on your property.
Or concrete or gravel on your property, unless it would fall under to the depth permit situation, I think is what it is. So if it was a ground level patio, that's in.
One of the things that has been really nice is that when somebody does one in my neck, particularly some of today, well, somebody that went into just she found a rubber meeting shed, and she was going to put it out in her backyard. So the only thing that would fall under is, yes, you don't need to permit for it, but you still have to be within your lot setbacks. So what she did, and in fact, I've had at least 3 of this pieces just last week. So what they did is they filled out the permit, they submitted it, we did an inspection, and then when we told them that there was no charge for that. So for the service that we did, just to make sure the lot coverage, the lot setbacks were done, and then that goes into their street corner in case the neighbor says, hey, did they have a permit? This way we can say, yes, they did, but we didn't charge them.
And let me try to summarize that for the 1 or 2 people that are still online. The village administrator explained that someone recently, today, called in about a Rubbermaid shed that's under 100 square feet, about a permit. She completed the application so that it could be confirmed that it's fit within the setbacks within the code, but there was no charge for that. And then that application that had no charge just goes into the property file for records as to it. So, okay, so any?
You have this sidewalk, I mean, sidewalk, and then next to winter, it has a sidewalk, that means I have a sidewalk, right? So what am I supposed to do?
So the question was, you're between 2 sidewalks and our ordinances require you to put in a sidewalk. I think our ordinance would require it if it was a new build, but doesn't require it as existing. But I assume the question then is that sidewalk goes against your lot coverage percentage, and what you do then? I would imagine that would be one of those cases where a variance would have to be granted for that sidewalk to be put in there.
It's going to eliminate for everything else because there's some.
Can I ask a quick question? I know with all of my properties, my sidewalk is actually not on my property. It is actually on the right of way of the street. So I don't know if yours would apply to that or not.
If my neighbor would probably have that up on grass, if there does. I'm just wondering, I know I'm not the only house in town that we have situation.
Right, but I'm just saying, I believe most of the sidewalks in town are actually on the street right away. They're not actually on your property. Is that, I don't know if that's true or not. I don't think that probably applies to all the properties.
Right. The question or discussion for those listening online is about one of the commission members' sidewalk is actually in the right of way, and whether or not sidewalks would be in the right of way. Of course, if it's in the right of way, it would not count against the lot coverage. But I think it's something that we should probably look at for those sidewalks on there, that we didn't necessarily consider that. As she brought up, there is competing interests, building sidewalks for a walkable community versus lot coverage. So I don't know that that's something we thought about. So I think that's definitely something when we convene to discuss this, that should be a topic. Is there anybody else? Sure.
I got lots that are non-conforming, for instance, in that Westwood store over on Roadside, somebody lost their shed over into the cemetery. If he is or she is over the limit already, maybe able to replace their shed or their additional sheds.
All right, the question was about non-conformity, and an example given in a last storm, someone lost a shed, and if that shed caused more lot coverage than would be permitted, can they rebuild their shed? So non-conformity, so if this were to pass, any non-conformity would be allowed to continue, meaning the person, if that shed caused them to go over their percentage, they wouldn't be forced to take it down, to be within the percentage. However, if the shed blows down in a windstorm and they want to replace it, the way our code and Ohio law works is once the nonconformity is extinguished, it doesn't come back. So that person would have to apply for a variance to exceed the lot percentage. Now, I can't speak for BZA because I'm not a member, but I have a hard time seeing BZA deny that a variance to replace a shed that fell down. But it is an extra step they would have to go through. So good example. Thank you.
What's the cost of it?
Yep. Anybody else to speak on lot coverage? All right, one more. Oh, we got two more. Can you give me 30 seconds to write notes from the last one before you start? Thank you.
Start reciting the Constitution from that time.
Okay, thank you. Before I forget, thank you.
I was just curious of a couple of points that Terry, you might be able to help with this. Just questions in relation to how the calculation is done. Obviously, if you have two lots that are contiguous, that's not 40% of each lot, that's 40% of the total square footage.
If they are two different parcels, that's what you're saying, right?
You own two parcels, but they're contiguous.
Okay, the thing about it is that accessory buildings are swimming pools or anything like that have to be on the same parcel as the primary structure. So that second parcel, even though it does not have a primary structure on it. So then again, that would have to come to BCA for variance. But again, like the mayor said, I cannot see BCA not granting that, can't guarantee it. But that's not unusual for accessory structures to have to be on the primary.
In fact, BZA just granted one of those last month or 2 months ago.
And second, you mentioned that the primary use of this was for the impervious structures, right?
It is one, a lot of communities have it because you don't want someone to completely pave and cover their entire lot.
Correct.
And a lot of it stems from stormwater, because the more you cover, the more it goes into storm sewer in municipality drains, which, as was pointed out, we have some issues with ours. And so covering more surface area creates more runoff, creates more stormwater problems.
So pardon my ignorance, because I didn't read this in the code, but it would seem that the 40% needs to be defined, because there is a definition for impervious structures that does not include roof structures. It is only concrete or patio type. So does that 40% include the roof structure and impervious? Because I don't think that's clear in the code as it's written.
And you're correct, it's not just the roof structure. For instance, a swimming pool is treated the same way. The ideas of water connecting into the ground, there's something sitting on top of the ground, not a lot of that water goes through. So a shed, a garage, a swimming pool, even a deck, if you notice our rules say.
In progress.
Boards and decks, so a piece of water can go through boards, and that is the reason why. So there are a lot of different things, but I think the definitions are very important, and I agree with you, that's what we talked about. As we go through, these are issues in my job, and I agree that the definitions we need to look at, and what need to be understandable for everyone, it shouldn't be a secret. So I think looking at the definition.
Thank you. And lastly, it's as far as determining the percentages in additional you explained, are there already hydrology calculations put into these to this setting to determine how the percentage or how the current code is set up?
This gives, these percentages are what I call political growth percentages to find this. And I don't care if it's a small village like Pleasantville or a large town like Pickering. Those are the percentages that somewhere in the planning world or the zoning world has designated as these are typical percentages that we should follow for this area meaning the square footage. So this isn't something that committee brought up. It makes me feel bad because the committee listens to the facts and decides if we need changes. I've written to them. Our agenda has many things that I can bring to that I believe needs to be relooked at, because I believe the zoning rules and regs are for the people, and I also believe that is a living document that needs to change. What we did 25 years ago, and I think bed and breakfast is a really good one. What we did back then, we don't do now, or vice versa. So we will continue to look at the zoning rules and regulations and welcome any phone calls that people want to give to me, because I, again today, talked to 3 different people on the phone about zoning requirements that would not be allowed based on what they want to do and how we can solve the problem. The job is not to punish, but it's to educate and just help them conform. So, I continue to say, we need right back to this.
I appreciate that. The only other thing I'll say is,
I was if I can, just to clarify, so the percentages that have been proposed, we actually discussed a whole bunch of them in different ranges. Those are based on the feedback they're getting. The committee can decide to change those, up those. I don't think anything would, I'm pretty safe in saying I don't think anything would go lower than what it currently is, but they always have the option to raise it up. And we had some good debate and discussion about those percentages, bringing up some of the very issues that have been brought up tonight. So, just because that's what's proposed doesn't mean that's what might be finalized. They could change.
with the relative ambiguity to most of those subjects, I would suggest we need to research it much, much longer, just leave it the way it is at the moment, and maybe revisit it at a later time.
Alicia Hoskins, 429 South Main Street. Well, for example, my aunt lives on North Street and her garage is over 40% of the variance for her lot. So if her house burns down, does that mean she'll have to tear down her garage before she can build her house back up?
Well,
I mean, from what you're saying, and then the 375 variance, which is not, it could happen or it couldn't, it's just a money grab. It's not necessary. I don't understand what's going on. And we've been begging for water issues and runoff problems to be fixed for years. I mean, you finally did it after 9 years of calling in, and our shed no longer, well, sometimes it still floods because of the runoff, but because it runs into our yard. But, you know, I'll give you like a 95 on that because at least my yard isn't completely soaked anymore on that. But we would eventually like to build a garage back there. So I'd like the street to be, you know, fixed as well. But here I might not have enough room to build a garage now. I live on a double lot, but technically I might not have the room to build a double garage like I would like. And I think that's ridiculous. Living here in Baltimore, I pay enough in taxes. If we have an old vehicle. If I want to store, I have to store my old vehicle at my aunt's house, who has a garage that's bigger than her house. And I would like to have it at our house, but we're not gonna be able to build a garage per your variance.
Miss, can I ask you a question? You said you got a double lot. Are they combined lots or just two separate lots?
No, it's combined.
Okay, thank you.
We'll use this opportunity for another little quick, here's how the process works, since there was a question about the variance and the fee. So just so everyone knows, when a variance is applied for, it's not just a money grab, because what has to happen is the Board of Zoning Appeals has to meet within 30 days to consider that variance. Certified letters have to go out to all the adjacent property owners. Staff has to go out and look at the variance and do stuff. So there are village time and costs associated with that. So that's why there are fees associated with that. There is then at the variance, a public hearing where actually at a variance, the people providing input like so many have done tonight, but at a variance hearing, they're actually put under oath to provide its testimony in the variance, whether in favor or against those variances. So there is a lot of behind the scenes work that goes into a variance once one is applied for. Again, the example was that if the house burned down and because the garage was so big and it exceeded that percentage, yes, under the letter of the code, if this were adopted, would be required to have a variance. Again, I have a hard time seeing it get denied, and I can't promise that it wouldn't, but it is a home. So that is something they have to consider. Otherwise, you end up with an empty lot. So it's also not beyond the realm of possibilities that the BZA in the past has recommended council approve refunding variance fees. And that's been done about 2 months ago. I think it was a recommendation to do that. So, but those that have brought up about the lot coverage and the building getting destroyed, you are correct. It would require, if there's a percentage limitation and a building or a structure is demolished, it takes that non-conforming lot into conformity. To rebuild that requires a variance, very similar to the way a residential structure in a commercial zoned lot would need a variance to bring it back in, which is a problem we run into occasionally with some of the homes that are in our general business district, and they go to sell. The bank on a mortgage wants to know if the house burns down, can it be rebuilt? And without a variance, it does cause some people some problems, and it's something we try to correct, but it's like Terry said, a living document. So, Any other persons in person to speak? There was one or two online, so.
I just have a really quick question for you. I'm going to say,
Yeah, we're having.
Structure there, it would have to be on the lot where our main home was. So basically, we own that part now, so literally not even put anything on.
So-
If this gets passed, it significantly reduces what we want to do for our home. And the back of it would have to be on the lot of homes up. So I'm trying to understand that.
So the question for those online is a parcel with a residential structure on it, a vacant parcel right next door owned by the same person, but two separate parcels, being able to put an accessory structure, a garage, a barn, or whatever on that second parcel. And again, under our existing code, that's actually prohibited because an accessory structure like a garage needs a primary structure on the parcel. What happened on North Main Street is a couple property owners, they bought two parcels that had residential structures on them, tore one residential structure down, and then wanted to put a garage in its place. And in order to do that, they went through BZA to receive their variance to get the garage put on, since they were two separate parcels. And what? Absolutely. Yep, it was approved.
Yeah, but they were, they said they would be applying to combine their lots.
Yeah.
I believe that was, that was something.
They're going to be combining the lots as well. So. All right, any other persons in person before I flip over here? Let me see if we can do this online. Actually, tell you what. Let me do it like this for those online since I have the chat up. If anybody on the Zoom meeting would like to say something, and you can mark in the chat real quick that you want to say something. And then we'll flip it over so everyone can hear you.
There was a question there.
What?
There's a question there. I don't know what time.
Oh, well, I'll just read that one.
Okay.
Sorry to the people online. There was a question and I'll just read that. It says, what happens if the will of the residents of the village is clear that they are not open to these kinds of changes? Does it get implemented regardless? Again, this is the public hearing, so the committee takes this input, has the opportunity to approve what's been proposed, change what's been proposed, or just scrap it altogether. If they send any sort of approval, whether it's as currently written or with changes, that then goes to council for consideration. Council has legislation for 3 readings, plus also has to have a public hearing prior to voting on those proposed changes. It doesn't become effective unless council approves it by a majority vote. Probably making them seasick.
Did you have anything else there?
It doesn't look like it.
Can everybody hear me if I speak right here without using my, I'll try to speak out. Ms. Hoskins said, just to let you know, I also have a lot and a half on one of my properties. About a year back, my wife went and put a she shed. I don't know where I said that. We couldn't do that because I haven't combined the lots. Okay, so we did not do that. Now, I will tell you, I did some calculations on my properties, because I was really concerned about, we were talking about these numbers. Actually, the number I proposed was a larger percentage of what we ended up agreeing with. And I'll just give you a quick rundown of what I have. I've got a property on the corner of Washington Street in Fremont. And typically corner lots are small. You don't really have a backyard, so we're tied in there. On that property there, I've got a paved lot, or a paved driveway, and a 3-car garage. See, I'm a little slow, okay? But on that lot right there, not counting the extra lot, I am well over our 35% right now. So, and I'd actually sent an email to the mayor and our village administrator that I think we need to update that and raise that percentage. Because yes, my lot is tight. I don't want to see it a lot tighter than what it is, but I don't think 40% is enough on R3. And mind you, my lot is one of the smaller ones because it is a corner lot. But right now, I'm at 45% if you don't count my extra lot. Now my extra lot is a half lot. But if you add the extra half lot, now I'm down to just under our spec. I'm actually around just between 30 and 35, so I'm in good shape there. But I'm not combined, so theoretically, if I want to put something else on there, I could not. Okay. Now my other residential property is in Baldwin Street. Now, mind you, it is not a residential lot. It is actually zoned downtown general business, I believe. So none of this really applies. And mind you, it was built turn of the century, it wasn't this century. So it goes way back. I've got probably the biggest barn in town.
So if it's business lot, it doesn't count.
But, right, these are R1, R2, and R3, which are residential lot classifications.
Because if I understand, mine is on a business lot.
If yours,
I'm running a business out of my house.
right, well.
So that doesn't count.
So the lot coverage is not the same. My business lot is, I've run percentages, but I'm probably 95, 96% coverage. I have a large parking lot and in a building that I've got 2 lots there too. And out of those 2 lots, I've got almost all covered. I actually put in grass just so I would get some water coming back into the soil. I hate to see everything run off.
I had college museum, we put that new tin roof on, and again, it's crammed together.
Yeah.
And it flooded my backyard.
Really now,
And I had to get dirt raised all the way around my fence like this, to keep the water from coming into my yard.
So
And the county did not help me out at all.
if I may, for the people online that might not be able to hear, the statement in question has been about lot coverage and the size, and some of the small lots already exceed that. But then the question came up about a business lot, and this would only apply to residential properties, R1s, R2s, and R3s. I looked in a speaker from earlier that is concerned about these percentages, mentioned that her parcel is actually zoned a business. So I looked that up real quick, and in chapter 1260, which is our downtown mixed use district, the lot coverage percentage is capped out at 80% currently. So a business lot and a residential lot would be different here, but there is a maximum percentage coverage, at least in our downtown business already. Sorry, I just wanted to.
So anyhow, that's just a little background. So I agree that we need to raise the limits, especially on the smaller lots. But that's one of the reasons for this public hearing, so we can get input from the other residents of the village. So we welcome your input. So thank you for coming.
And why we're on the differences between some of them and the residentials, because again, our residentials don't have this. Mixed residential village district in chapter 1256. says so in a parcel that would be mixed residential village district, already in the code, max building coverage, 20%, impervious coverage, 30%, 70% green space required front yard. That's for a single family dwelling. For a multifamily dwelling, maximum building coverage is 25%, impervious coverage maximum 60%, green space in the front yard requirement 60%. There's a couple of other single family type buildings in that. There's a chart in there, but just the committee and the residents here, there certainly we do have some maximum coverage in other provisions. And as was suggested, separating out building coverage versus impervious coverage and green space, at least one provision in our code already does that.
And I appreciate you saying you want more percentage. Did you have a percentage in mind?
Yeah, I've looked around, I've looked at other communities as well. Now, we definitely have, I hope you don't hear me, I'm sorry. Baltimore being an older village, we definitely have smaller lots in the R3 than, like Pickering per se, unless you go into the old downtown. And Robert, I mean, you're a developer. If you're developing an area, you're not going to do these small R3. You're going to do at least an R2 or possibly an R1 lots. That's what people want now, honestly. Although personally, I don't like to know that much. So what I'm looking at, and I'm seeing in other places, I'm thinking probably around 50% total. And that includes impervious and roof. Now, on my property on Balsall Street, I'd actually separated it out where I had structure and lot, because I've got my property there is gravel lot, okay? And with the gravel lot, I ended up being, let's see here, a little dark up here, to tell you the truth. Again, pushing 45% with the gravel. I would like to pay that. Now, mind you, again, I'm in a different zoning there, so it isn't an issue. But even if I paid it as it is, I'm still under 50%. But I would hate to have more coverage than what I have. I think 50% is where we need to top out. And I would like to know what, I mean, I know you mentioned 70%.
I work mine into two different tabs.
Right. I'm thinking 50% total, okay? The only places that I've really seen it exceed that is you get like German Village, which we're talking miniature, downtown, old town Columbus lots, where the houses are shoulder width apart, okay? If you've got any grass to auto, you're a lucky man. But I really believe 50% is where we need to top out. That's where I feel in my heart.
From my research, when you ran into problems was when you had shorter, deeper lots, because that required a longer driveway if you built further back.
Right.
And I think that's why, after looking at a lot of homes, I came to the conclusion that to try to appease 99.9% of the people, if you broke it into two categories. But
Right.
I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, and I don't see, I have any problem at all with us breaking that down into different categories. But I really think we need to top out maybe 50% on R3.
And so for those on the line that might not have heard Mr. Mager, the question was, does he have a percentage in mind that it should be increased to? And his feeling is 50% total coverage.
On R3.
On an R3.
Yeah.
Yeah. And did you say, using your Balsall property, for example, did you include your gravel area in that calculation?
With the gravel in it ends up being, I say just a, I said 45, but I'm holding it up where I can catch my trifecta better. It's 48%, excuse me.
The gravel by the code is not included in the purpose structure.
Right, but I'm counting that in there because I would like for it to be concrete. Although I'm taking donations for that. You know, help out.
And for those online, that was just a clarification on lot coverage for one of Mr. Monger's properties that he's using as an example as a basis for his
And I probably
opinion that it
have
should be 50%.
some of the more crowded lots just because of the one having this large barn on it. And again, this was put together, the house was built in 1903 and the barn was built in 1900. And my other property is a corner lot, which is always high.
All right. So with that, I think we have concluded.
Any other people think it should be raised?
I, for one, was arguing for a higher percentage. And because our swimming pool provisions already include a maximum lot coverage for which a swimming pool can cover, which I believe is 20% of the yard, that swimming pools not be included in the lot coverage because it's somewhere else. And I don't think a swimming pool adds to the runoff issue because it catches the water. I personally wanted a little higher percentages and didn't think swimming pools should be included, but I will, that's only my opinion, so I'll.
Yeah, I would like to add in, I also would like to discuss increasing that percentage. Because I questioned the gravel driveways being labeled impervious, so I just think we need to talk about and better define impervious surfaces.
And that's Member McCreary saying she's in favor of evaluating the percentages.
I think we need to look at
the inclusion of gravel as the impervious surfaces and
different combinations of impervious. We're going to talk about roofs. We have to talk about, different types of, what about mulched areas? I'm assuming that would be considered a pervious surface, but the gravel is considered impervious. So again,
Who's could be talking about?
Pardon?
Most of them, I believe, consider gravel at least partially impervious. Okay. It all depends on who's code. I've seen.
Right. So that's what I'm saying. I think we need to look at and talk about these different percentages based on what is covering that particular parcel.
So from what I'm hearing so far tonight, at least on this, because we have, if anyone wants to go back and watch that discussion from the last meeting, we did have a lot of discussion about it. We said about this stuff. So, Mr. Looney, Ms. Williamson.
They don't want to have any regulations and the neighbor does something.
Did any other commission member want me to relay opinions at this time or just save them for a later?
I just want to say that nobody wants any regulations, but when their neighbor imposes their water on their property, then they will want us to do something about it. And if we don't have something, there's nothing we can do. You will have to live with the water that the system is not built to control. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. All right. Any other, Mr. Looney, anything, or you good? All right. So.
There's gotta be some other way.
All right.
It's not kind of like HOA, this is what we do because of this thing.
All right.
In small towns.
I want to.
All those things. And I got a call for.
I'm sorry, guys, I'm not even hearing you.
I'm saying, that people moved, I moved out of HOA to come here 7 years ago. So that my family just left on working, we do the right thing, and it's been last year, water permit, all of that. But we start, especially these houses that are smaller, and like she was saying back here, she could authorize her homes to work hard for. And now she's gonna run into a problem of maybe putting something in her backyard, like bloodshed, and right now, it's not changed. Something they work hard to do, it doesn't seem right.
And
Because while maybe 33%, he's still 100% property.
so I want to make sure I summarize this right. A, so that because I'm not writing all these notes because they're coming in so quick. So when I watch this later from my notes for when we discuss this, I have it, and for those online, the concern is that these begin to feel like homeowners association requirements, and some people move to this area to avoid or to get out of those types of situations. Did I summarize that correctly so that when I look at it later, I'm, okay.
Our law, my neighbor, attesting things, we had that our yard, get private employees, but still keep our house great. So things like this, like where it's, our house is fixed in, we're having my own business, we shouldn't have to worry about it, we shouldn't worry about something like putting a pool in, or putting a shed, or she's right, or her home feeling like those things that may be small to others, or they are not going to happen in an account because people do away with HOAs and things like that for whatever reason.
And I appreciate what you're saying. So I moved here about 18 years ago, and I've been in the same home here. So when I moved here, the neighboring parcel next to me was immaculate, spotless. I have watched over years that same parcel not be so nice. So I think there's a fine line. We don't want too much regulation and too many ordinances. At the same time, we have to make sure that we don't allow the opposite to happen. So I appreciate that you moved in and you cleaned up and took care of your, I think that's great. It's a complicated situation. It's changed owners. Mattresses, trash, numerous outbuildings that have decayed and are crumbling. Wait, I'm sorry, I can't hear you, sorry.
Is it just an outbuilding that has a wood floor, or is it an outbuilding that has a concrete floor? What is it? Because technically if it has a wood floor, it can put as many of those out.
No, and I'm not saying, what I'm saying is, so those were in place already there, but it's been the lack of maintenance. So that's why I'm saying it's kind of the opposite.
If I want to make sure, am I maybe summarizing it, that what you're trying to say is kind of what Ms. Williamson said about
there's a fine line
There's a
between.
fine line, and there may need to be something to prevent things from getting bad.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
There's not something that you can go to the village and say, they have numerous.
I have. That is partially why I'm here. That is why I'm here. I have worked with the village for years. So that's why I'm here. That's why we're listening. I've had issues. I have brought it to the attention. That's why I'm here.
That they don't tend to, but there are many renters who don't take pride in their living. And so it goes back to the first thing I talked about, I completely understand that wanting to do something about long-term renters.
This is not a renter, so these are property owners.
I feel like it's more than
So-
homeowners. There are some homeowners that just don't care, I get that.
And-
There are many of us, like Alicia,
I think we're starting to say the same things over and over again. I think
I just wanted to add that I appreciate what you're saying. So I think I'm just saying I want to balance it out. I don't want too many regulations. At the same point, I think we have to be careful. And that's why we're listening to all of the input.
This was talked about, so we think tonight for a meeting, who voted for it, the regulation percentage to be this low? Because a lot of you are saying now you want to look at higher being higher, what's our amount being so low?
Can I answer that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Miss, what we've done, we've actually looked at similar regulations in other villages, and we used that as a guide to start with. And I believe it was 25, 30, and 35%. And then we even upped the R3 up to 40%. And then it was discussed at meeting that everybody should go home and measure your own lot to get an idea so we actually knew what we were talking about. Because this is just a preliminary, this is our our first meeting even talking about.
And-
So that's where it started from.
And I don't think when we decided to send it to a public hearing, it was a consensus to send it with those percentages. But as you've heard, there are several that think those percentages might need to change. But we needed public input to find out, you know, it could have gone completely the other way, and everybody tonight could have shown up and said, no, I think 20% across the board is great. It could have gone that way, and we might have been high. So when we decided to send it for consideration, knowing that planning and zoning has to have a public meeting on it to obtain that public input so that it can better inform the decision about if it's done and what percentages before it even goes to council. So it was a consensus on those percentages, because I voted yes to send it for the public hearing, even though I think the percentages should change and pools should be included, because we need this public hearing so that we can get this input to make a better informed decision about how to proceed. So.
Robert, were you saying that she's 70%, or what were you saying that she?
I was proposing 70%, which would be 30% carbon, 40% carbon.
And what is it you're saying?
I was saying a total of 50% on R3. Currently, what was proposed was 40%. But I've been looking at all my numbers. Quite honestly, look at my lots. I would want more on my lots than what I have. I think the green space shouldn't be less than what it is. And I see one of them right now is 48%, the other is 45%. And that's where I come up with 50%. Does that answer your question?
So, last one, because I'm getting hot.
Obviously, stormwater is a huge problem, and I appreciate the value that was by the village to continuously work towards what's going to be a 20-30-year plan to fix those. What I would impose upon you as you guys think about this is, let's not try to fix that problem with just one solution. That stormwater issue has a multiple of things that cause it. And I especially believe that unfortunately, especially with people with bigger lots, you're really subsidizing the smaller lots at their expense to fix that problem that really needs to be a whole community come together and solve. Like I said, I'm for the regulation. I think we're going in the right direction and getting the limits where they need to be, but you don't just continue to put oil in a truck and leave. You fix the oil.
So for online, the question was, stormwater is a problem and it needs I want to make sure I summarize, it's a more holistic approach towards it. And my response to that would be, I agree. But planning and zoning is only charged with the zoning part. So, in council, there is other stormwater mitigation efforts going forward. But, planning and zoning is limited in their scope to the zoning code.
And I agree. I just want to be burdened 100% for fixing the problem.
Right. All right. I know I said last, but I'll say one more last call on public hearing for lot coverage. Let me check online.
Can I ask, Mayor, can I ask one quick question?
All right, we got one question from Mr. Monger.
I would seriously like to poll the citizens that are here. I would like to know what you think. What percentage do you think?
I can write it down on the way out.
That'd be fine if you want to write it down. But
Or sign in, write percentages that you would like to be.
I guess I would like to know what your input is. Mr. Lane says 70% total. I know what my recommendation is. I'm sorry, Chris, I can't hear you.
Take each person's property into consideration differently. Like my lot is set
It's not, it's called spot zoning and it's illegal.
Yeah.
So it has to be classification. But the recommendation was for the persons here next to their sign-in, the commission members would like to know your input, and for the people online, you can throw it in the chat or send an email. There's only 2, so. But so that we get an idea of what the residents that showed up tonight, idea for percentage coverage is, so that when the commission discusses that, we can take that into consideration.
We are discussing just R3. We're not really having any discussion on R2 or R1, correct?
The question was mostly discussing R3, no questions on R1 or R2. I think most of the concern that I've heard tonight has to do with the smaller lots on R3.
I can make sure we're on the same page.
There are some concerns with some of the, how they are, so I think if we look at them, we should obviously consider all of them. No. All will be considered. I think the clarification was most of the concern we've heard tonight has to deal with the smaller R3 lots. There's more concern over the coverage on those than there is the larger lots.
But you can put your coding, what your zoning is, and the percentage you think it should be on where you signed in, and we will look at that data.
Yep.
Hope I didn't speak out of turn. I'm going to allow to ask that.
Oh, no, absolutely.
But I would like the input.
Yeah. I think the input's good, because that's what this meeting is for, to get the input, and what everyone thinks percentage coverage should be is valuable input for us.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Now, for the planning commission. It's 8:55 and we have several new business items, but it's also getting warm in here.
And dark.
And dark. So I would ask the commission if they want to continue the meeting with our new business or postpone that and adjourn for the night after these public hearings.
Mayor, I would like to propose that we postpone and move to adjourn, so that way we can have additional time and discuss that later without feeling rushed.
All right, McCreary is making the motion to adjourn, and that way there's no rush on decisions tonight after the public hearing or consideration of those new business items, and they would be discussed at the August 12th meeting. Is there a second on that?
I will second that.
Williamson seconds that. McCreary?
Yes.
Looney?
Yes.
Mager?
Yes.
Williamson?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes as well. So 5-0, we will adjourn at 8:56. Our next meeting is August 12th. The consideration for tonight's public hearing will be on it, as well as those new business items, time permitting, and committee going to consider that. I know most of the in-person people have left at this point, but for those that are remaining, we appreciate you coming out and your input tonight. It's been valuable, so we do appreciate that. For those online, hopefully it worked out okay. I'll watch the playback and hopefully it all worked out, and we appreciate you joining as well. So everyone, thank you and have a good night.
Thank
you for coming.
The new agenda. So the way that I listed was the way I would like to talk about it. That is based on the number of